So once you get the head close to where you want it, now I'm looking at the old handle, which is 18 inches long. As you can see, I could in theory have it here, but I want a little bit tighter fit here. I will now start using the rasp. Now this has been shaved down close enough to dimensions that I know I'm going to have good grain throughout. So I have my wear marks, and I'm going to work them down a little bit, and I'm going to try to make it so it's really filled up. So I'll still use the shaving bench, but I'll lightly file around this. Something you can do if need be is take a candle. Now I actually have some towels with some oil on it to make it really smoky. Same way you'd do this with the gun stock. This will allow you to get lamp black. I don't know why a lamp would work, or a candle, but try to get the black soot on the eye of the Tomahawk. And you can do this earlier, but it's especially important at the end when you're trying to get that really tight fit. Now, as you can see, those black marks give me really good indication of where it's hitting and where I need to take wood off. I will say, sometimes the final fitting of the head is easier to do in a vise. And what you're kind of trying to do here is, so on the eye of these most throwing hooks, like this style, obviously if you're using a different time of axe, it would be different. It's smaller in the bottom, bigger here. So I'm essentially trying to match this angle on that piece of hickory. Kind of like that. So, as you can see, this is where I want it. Now there's this big gouge here I want to avoid, but I'll use that for holding it in the vise. But I got this where I want, and I am past the 18 inches. So I can cut a little bit off the bottom, which is kind of where I want. I still have a little bit here that I can have. So this is where I want the head now. And it will go up, as I sand the handle, it will go up a little bit farther. So I'm going to knock the head out. And then the next thing to do, now the better you get with a draw knife, the less of this you'll have. But I do have some bumps there, from peeling the grain. I'm now going to take a rasp and smooth this out. I got the basic shape. And also I'm going to make this fit my hand very well. So I'll knock the head off, which if the handle's already a size, you want to be using a mallet to do this, but I'll be trimming the end of it off anyway. So, and I can see where the head was. I probably should have marked this before I took the head off. But I'm going to mark a line here because I don't want to work up above this, because that's already to size. I will lightly sand it though. And then I'm going to take a large rasp. In this case, you don't need one this big, but I have one this big. And I'm clamping where the material I'm going to cut off, and I'm going to slowly work this down, taking off all the high spots and trying to make this a nice straight handle. And what you'll do is once you get one side done, you'll rotate it around. And you should have the teardrop shape pretty much in from the draw knife, but you're just trying to kind of smooth out any wrinkles. So for getting this part straight, besides just a regular rasp, not very authentic, but I have been playing with a Sureform rasp, and I guess in theory a wood plane might be a other possibility. You know, that's one thing I'll say about hand tools is there's 100 different methods. Something else you can use is a long straight edge like this ruler or this yardstick, metal yardstick. You can place it on there, give you an idea where the high spots are. And then the last thing I'll say about shaping this handle is down here where your hand's going to be, you want to make sure it's comfortable in your hand because you're going to be the one using it. You know, that's having the grain be straight and through it and a good fitment on the head's the most important, but the next most important thing, I guess the third, would be that it fits well in your hand. Now for me, this is a throwing hawk, you know, so texture isn't a big deal, but, and you'd do this later, but if this was a more of a chopping, putting some sort of texture here might be a possibility. Not for a throwing hook because I want it to slide release easy, but yeah, so I'm basically now just working this handle down to make it square and kind of pretty. So something you'll find yourself doing a lot of is to get it straight. Sometimes the best way is to just hold it like this and look down and see where you can see curves or twists or bumps. And then if you see an area where you think wood needs to come off of, where there's a bump or a twist, you can mark it to try to get the right shape. You'll find yourself doing this a lot. Yeah, you'll find yourself doing this a lot. And then I'll just go through and now I know where I need to remove a little wood from. So now that I got all the rough trimming done, I am going to put the handle on. I got all the rough shaping. The handle's the way I want it. I'm going to trim it to size. Now most Tomahawk handles are, as I said before, roughly about 18 inches. Right now I have 18.5 to the bottom with the head. That puts me at 19. The overall handle's 23. Now you want to have a little bit of wood there for a throwing hawk, and as a regular hawk, you know, chopping and stuff. You want to have a little bit of mass there. above the handle. That way as it wears in, it'll give you a longer life. So I generally am going to make that about 3/4 of an inch or maybe an inch. I'll actually trim it. I'll trim it right about an inch. So then I can measure there. Put it in the vise. And put an inch above the head. And I'll measure from that point. Now if I was in a competition that I need 18 inches, I would do it at 18. I'm actually gonna go 20. I like it a little longer. And then I'm gonna trim that with whatever saw of your desire. Honestly, I'd probably be better off going into the basement using the bandsaw. But for video purposes, I'll do old handy. And now the handle's trimmed to length. So now that I trim the end, I want to round the corners a little bit. And just do that with a regular file. Make a nice transition. Follow the top a little bit. And then I'll flip it around to this side. And actually I'm going to knock the head out. Now I'm going to mark where the head is here. And then I'm going to knock it out. I should be using a wooden mallet now. And I'm going to do a little bit of shaping on this end. So as you can see, this is a pretty neat and then I'm actually going to round the corners on the top. There we go. That's pretty much it for filing. Now I can move on to finishing. So there's two different methods for finishing. One's more traditional than the other one. So the more traditional method would be scraping. Now you can do this with any sort of scraper. This is just a razor blade. Basically work it up like this, getting rid of all the file marks and stuff like that. And as you can see, it's smoothing up pretty good. Again, this takes some time, but it's also kind of relaxing. The wood will naturally have, at some point I'm going to do a whole video on scraping, because I use it a lot. But wood will naturally have a way it wants to come off. And this is just a razor blade, but if you have a furniture scraper, proper scrapers, they would probably even work better. And if you're not into being super traditional and just want to get it made, the other options, of course, a regular sander. Now, you could also, if you didn't have a normal sander, you could certainly use a block and hand sandpaper and do the same thing, just take you a little longer. And my recommendations would be to do your last grit. Like if I'm doing with a power sander, the bottom grit that I'm going to take it to, and this goes for a lot of what I do, on something like this, if I'm going to take it to 220, I'll do 220 on the orbital with this guy, and then I'll hand sand 220. You know, you want to do your last sanding with hand sandpaper. Now, for a throwing hook, I think 180, 220 is plenty fine enough. If you have a strictly decorative hawk, you know, like you sometimes get those brass ones at shows. And, you know, maybe you're doing a curly maple handle and you're not intending to throw it. Sure, go finer, make it prettier, by all means. But for a functional throwing hook, I think 120 or 180, 220 is plenty fine enough because it's going to get beat up. But yeah, I'll take this till I get all the tooling marks out. And then I will go to the finer grit. And basically make it nice and smooth. That way it slides off the hand nice and well for the throwing competitions this Tomahawk's intended for. So now that I'm done either power sanding or scraping, I will finish it off with some good old-fashioned hand sanding. Sanding with the grain. You know, this is pretty much how any wood project or metal project for that matter pretty much ends. So, before I sand, I've been talking about this throughout the video, but I drew out those lines following the grain. And as you can see throughout it, and I could draw plenty more of these, I can follow the grain and draw it all the way down. Now when you're changing thickness, like towards the top, you're going to get layers like that where the grain ends. But for the most part, through this Tomahawk, the grain's going all the way through this. Now even if you're not making a handle, if you're buying this, and you see the grains all coming wonky, or there's not a lot of grain going all the way through, you want to avoid buying that handle because it will more than likely snap on you. Something to keep in mind. Sometimes if you are actually looking, say, at like a surplus store, and they have hammer handles. The reason they're in the surplus or the seconds bucket is because of grains like that and they know they're going to snap. So something to keep in mind. So now that I got the handle sanded down, the handle sanded down to the way I want it, I'm going to put a little stain and finish. You don't have to do stain, you can go right to oil. But I kind of want to make this a little darker basically because it's going to get beat up. So it'll hide from throwing it, so it'll hide some of the beat up marks. So, and I have the stain I want to use up. So I'm just putting a little on a rag. It's just some old walnut gun stock stain. But, you know, you can pretty much use any stain that would mesh with whatever finish you're going to use. I prefer oil finish, either linseed or tung oil. And also this will help if you have a mix of both sap and heartwood. For hickory, this will kind of make them match a little better. So now the last step in the process is to apply oil. Now I will put a couple coats. Now I've in the past used a lot of linseed oil, but I think this time we use tung oil. Now linseed oil, probably more 18th century authentic, or if you really want to be 18th century authentic, you can apply some of this stuff from Beck Flintlocks. But in this case, I think I'm going to use tung oil. Again, use your favorite oil finish. Now, one thing I do like to do, though, for the first coat, I want it to be pretty runny. I will mix up a little bit of mineral spirits to make my first coat a little bit thinner. And that should actually, I want to give it a little bit more color. Then you don't have to do this. I'm kind of playing right now. I'm going to put a drop of stain in there. That was just some nut brown wood stain. But I'll mix this up for my first coat. And now I really want to get that end grain. That's really what I want to seal up. So I'm going to apply this on with a brush. And I will keep going over that. And I'll let that sit for a minute. And then I'll flip it over. If you look, you can see how it just soaks that oil up. Then I'll go back to rotate this a few times. This is some really thick, thin finish. So it's going to, by using the lacquer thinner, it should suck into the wood deeper. So now that I got the coat of finish that I thinned down, I'm going to go over this with some steel wool, like you would most things between coats. You know, lightly. And then I'm going to open my tongue oil. Or again, whatever oil you're using, I'm just using this tongue oil here. This time I'm going to put it on a rack, and I'm not going to thin it, and I'm going to put on a rather light coat. You know, just one dab will do this whole thing. Again, though, I'm going to spend quite a bit of time, make sure I get that end grain really soaked in. And then you'll go over the rest of it. Make sure I seal up the grain. And it also makes it look attractive. And I'll do the same thing 2 or 3 more times, letting it dry 24 hours between coats. And then probably before I will let it dry a whole, probably 2 days before I actually use the axe. I find that really lets the oil harden completely and is extremely durable. Now that I got the handle complete, I got several coats of finish on it, it's time to seat it into the handle. So, I'll put it there, slide it on, take a wooden mallet, kind of prop it up against the vice shelf. A couple taps just to make sure it doesn't slide off. As you throw it, it's naturally going to work its way up the head, but that there will it'll keep seating itself in, compressing the wood. Now, if you ever get it to where it's all the way up top and you need to swell it back up, but you can always put a wedge in here. I did that here in the old handle to give it a little bit more life. But right now, this one should last probably a couple thousand throws.